And here we go. So I'm so glad that you all joined us on this awesome lunchtime, at least mountain time. It's great to see familiar faces and have you all with us for this second in our series of free webinars called Finding Freedom with Blue Dot Coaching. So our topic for today is something that's, I think, really alive for both me and for Jason, that we're excited to share. And that topic is embracing our humanity. And as many of you know, the coaching work that we do with people is based in an understanding referred to as the three principles. And the way that that understanding has unfolded in our lives has really led us to embrace our humanities in ways that I think I can safely say has led to a feeling of freedom and lightness and ease for both of us. And so that's what we wanted to share today. So for starters, I'd love to turn it over to Jason and have him kick us off with his insights, and then we'll take it from there.
All right, thanks so much. Well, I just want to share with you, I thought it was kind of humorous because Sumaya and I last week were talking about what we might share on this webinar, and we had a great conversation, and then Sumaya posted the topic, and I said, oh, that's what we're talking about. But as I thought about the specific title Sumaya came up with, I actually really love it because I'm a very visual person, and this idea of embracing our humanity gave me this lovely image of the different ways I have or have not embraced my humanity, depending on how thought looks to me, how the nature of who I am really looks to me. And so I want to share with you because I feel like I think there are four pretty distinct phases of my understanding. And I have a hunch that there are probably going to be some more, but I'm only up to four. So I thought I'd share with you, what that's looked like for me so far. So, phase one in understanding my thinking and embracing my humanity or not was really before I encountered the principles. And at that point, I would say all my thoughts looked really real and important to me. And I believed everything I thought. And the more emotion or the more, worked up I felt about a thought, the truer I thought it must be. And when I was living from that understanding, it's kind of funny, but I don't think there was any embracing going on. I think I was pretty prickly with my humanity and myself. And there was a lot of effort and a lot of struggle and a lot of conflict and discord because those thoughts had me constantly trying to figure out what to do about it. And so my humanity to me looked like kind of a battle to be fought, a contest or challenge to be overcome somehow. So there wasn't a lot of ease, and in my mind, I wasn't that interested in embracing my humanity. Then, having encountered the principles and the direction that they point, at this point, 16 years ago, something very different happened for me, and I saw that it was a little bit foolish to believe every thought that I had, because I started to understand that the nature of thought, the quality of our thinking is changing all the time. And so, I look back on that period of time, and what that meant for me was I now had kind of a new technique in my battle, or a new technique in my competition. And so Sumaya and I chuckle about how, I used to be guilty of saying, it's all thought, in a very dismissive way. And so, to me at that point, I don't know that there was an embrace of my humanity, but it felt like a handshake. Like I had a new, I was willing to be in a relationship with my thinking. whereas before there was really no relationship. There was no understanding about how I could be in relationship. It just sort of drove the bus. Now all of a sudden I felt like I could be in a relationship, but it was still kind of a standoffish one. And so, in terms of embracing my humanity, I was still using my understanding of the principles to kind of get what I wanted out of life or to manipulate my circumstances. At some point, what I started to understand more deeply was that the principles are not a technique. The principles are a description of how we work. And so I began to see with more clarity and more nuance the way that the feeling of my thinking is changing all the time. And that if I tuned into that feeling, then I have great information to work from. And so to me, I moved beyond the handshake, and now I felt like it really was an embrace, but it was a qualified embrace. It was kind of like the embrace that I might give one of my sons when they're really upset about losing a soccer game. It would be this consoling kind of hug. And behind that might be this feeling that still that, you wouldn't be feeling this way if you'd won, but it's okay that you lost. And so I felt like I was able to embrace my humanity, but to me, I didn't even realize that there was kind of a qualification to it, a condition on it, until a really recent conversation with Sumaya, where she helped me see that there's something even beyond that. So we were talking the other night about a situation that I found myself in where I was really frustrated with a longtime friend of mine. And essentially I was saying from that sort of consoling embrace kind of place, I was saying, I understand now that it really helps to just see it for what it is and understand that I'm in a low place and just trust that it'll pass. And don't get me wrong, that's been incredibly helpful. And the quality of my life is so, so different with that type of embrace of my humanity. And yet Sumaya said something to me that really opened a door. The gist of what she said, or at least what I heard, was something along the lines of, well, it's okay to experience it all, and to be disappointed and to be frustrated seems totally normal in this situation and really understandable. And in a flash, what I saw in that moment was that my consoling embrace, this kind of just wait for it to pass. I had this really funny image. So here we are in late October and Halloween is just around the corner. And I had this image of these trick-or-treaters at the door, but I don't want them to know that I'm there. So I'm kind of like, I quickly turn the lights out and I kind of hide in the corner and I'm really quiet. And I just say, if I just, hang out here for a little bit, that maybe they'll go away. They'll go away. Pretty soon they'll go away. I know they're going to go away eventually, right? And I just started cracking up because I felt like, oh my gosh, there's this feeling behind just let it pass that maybe not for everybody, but certainly for me had this tone of dissatisfaction, of kind of not being okay with the circumstances. And so when Sumaya said, well, it's totally natural to just feel those feelings, what I saw, what came to mind was this wonderful poem by our favorite poet, and I'm going to pull it up here, Rumi, our favorite poet Rumi, called The Guest House. So I'm going to read it to you. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. What I loved about that, what was so helpful about seeing that image of the guest house is realizing how often I have closed the door on uncomfortable emotions, how often I've hidden, hoping that those emotions would, not find anybody home and hurry along. And the idea that I could just be okay with all of them. And that for me, in that moment, talking to Sumaya, what I shared was I saw so clearly that the experiencing of an emotion or a feeling has nothing to do with taking action on it. So I could feel whatever I want. I can feel whatever I want to feel, whatever shows up. I don't have to do anything about it. I can invite them in for tea. I don't have to have them stick around for a full meal, but I can invite them in and then they'll move along. Another good friend of mine is, she's currently experiencing a lot of grief. She very recently lost her brother to cancer. And the experience of grief is such a fascinating one for me in this regard, because I think for so long I put it in a special category. And what I saw about it was that the way grief moves through us is unpredictable. When things show up, when we feel overwhelmed, and I have had the opportunity in the last couple of years to feel some profound grief at the loss of some good friends. And the unpredictability where things come out of nowhere and all of a sudden I'm completely overwhelmed. But it made so much sense to me that in the context of grief, I could just let those feelings come and go. And it didn't mean more than just that those feelings were passing through me. But for so long, I put grief in some special category. And I think with this conversation with Sumaya and my deepening understanding of the principles and really thinking about the message of the guest house, I'm seeing that grief is no different. Grief is just one example that we don't know when thoughts or feelings, emotions are going to arise for us. And so just like I found my grief passed much more quickly and gracefully when I allowed the feelings to just come, and then they would go. I saw that I could allow disappointment and frustration, sadness, anger. I could allow them to just arise and go, but not have to do anything about them. When I was in the midst of my grief, I would just let the feelings come and go. I didn't have to snap into action about it. So anyway, the idea of this embracing your humanity has really looked different to me at each of these steps along the way, depending on how I've understood thought and how I've understood my relationship to thought. So Sumaya, there you go for a kickoff. What would you like to add to that?
Thank you, Jason. I really, really enjoyed hearing that with fresh eyes, fresh ears. I'm going to go ahead and mute you, Jason, and I'll jump in just for the recording. So I have to say that was so fun to hear that evolution of what Jason has been seeing over time, seeing as I've been completely wrapped up with him in it all. It was nice to step back and hear that from a fresh perspective. I guess what I'd want to add to that, given what Jason was just sharing, is two things. The first is that I think what has made such a difference to me in fully embracing the whole range of what it means to be human is a deeper understanding of what I would call my inner worlds. And what I mean by that is, I think we all inhabit naturally two very different inner worlds. The first inner world is the world of our thinking mind. And that world is pretty much most of what we experience all the time. And it's what we create with our conceptual mind. It's everything that we judge. It's everything that lives in the world of concepts, ideas, and beliefs. And I think what has been so freeing for me is to see that that's not the only inner world that we have available to us. That underneath our thinking world, underneath the world we create for ourselves with our thinking mind, is a place of stillness and wholeness and quiet and well-being that's always there whenever our mind quiets. And that my understanding now of what it means to be human is that it is completely natural to toggle between those two worlds. Now, I think a lot of people don't realize that there's that other deeper, more quieter world of peace and ease that's always underneath. Many people just stay cycling in the world of thought, in the world of personal thinking and conceptual mind. But actually, what I've come to see as a full range of human experience is feeling both. And so what I would want to add to what Jason said is, I think a lot of times what happens for us is we pop in to the world of thinking and judging, and we have certain experiences. And the really interesting thing is, what we end up doing is we make meaning out of those experiences. We take them to mean something, whether that experience is frustration with someone, anger, that experience is anything that feels like pressure and contraction and just not feeling that great. We think it somehow means something. And over time, because we think it means something, the way I think about it is that we all end up with a scoreboard, like a scoreboard over time. And on that scoreboard is kind of how we over time come to judge ourselves. And so we make meaning of an experience that feels difficult, that feels challenging in some way, and we make it mean something either about other people or ourselves, and something goes on the scoreboard, either negative or positive. And so we go through life and this scoreboard gets more and more things on it. Every time we have a more challenging experience that feels more contracted, anger, frustration, depression, anxiety, you name it, doesn't really matter what it is. It really doesn't mean anything. It means nothing more than we're just in that part of the cycle. We're having a human experience. It's just where we are. I sort of like to think nothing to see here. But instead of thinking nothing to see here, we think, uh-oh, this means something. And so what it looks like to me is that scoreboard of ourself and our life comes with a lot of weight. It's a very, very heavy. It's like our running tally of whether we're okay, whether we're good enough, whether our life is worth something, whether we're worth something. And what, so you know, based on what's on that scoreboard, we then judge our experience and judge ourselves by what we should put on the scoreboard. Does this mean I'm not getting it? Does this mean I'm not good enough? Does this mean I'm not evolved enough? I'm not a good enough person? I have more to learn. I still have to get to somewhere better. You know, we put something on the scoreboard. And I think what has been so freeing for me is to realize, wait a minute, there is no scoreboard. That's an invention of each of our minds. It's an invention of my mind. Any kind of judging of myself or my experience over time makes no sense at all. That's just something that I make up in my head. There is no such thing. All there is this moment. There's nothing else. And in this moment, I'm either, creating a difficult experience, or there's ease and peace. Doesn't really matter where it is. There isn't anything to judge. It's just what it is. It's just where we are. We might be feeling grief. We might be feeling joy and love. And we simply don't have to judge any of it. Nothing, it doesn't mean anything about either ourselves or the people around us or our world or our life or anything else. It just is. Whatever it is we might be experiencing, it simply is. And as Jason said, that's not an invitation to believe our experience as something objectively true or real or having meaning and therefore have to, act on it. That doesn't mean that at all. It's kind of the opposite. It just is. It's an inner experience and nothing more. And if there's no scoreboard, well then shoot. That doesn't make any sense to judge. It doesn't make any sense to judge myself over time because that's just an invention. There is no such thing. So it's just one moment at a time. There's no whole. There's no overtime. There's just now. And now I'm either in a feeling of love and understanding and expansiveness, and I'm feeling connected to others, or I'm not, and things feel contracted, and it feels like there's pressure. And so what? There's nothing to be done about any of it other than to just flow with it. Flow with all of it. And it feels to me like it's by definition messy. It's by definition rich with challenge and ease and joy and anger and all of that. And if there's no scoreboard, then I can just rest in whatever I'm experiencing right now. And there's nothing to be done. I don't have anywhere to get to. I don't have to push myself to be better, do better. I just am. And as long as I'm aware of all of that, then I can just rest in that ease. And from that, paradoxically, without effort and without the judging myself, paradoxically, I can drop more often and more, more and more into that part of me that's more expansive, more loving, more joyful, and share that with other people. Not because I'm pushing myself to be a better person and be more loving and have more of that, but just because that's a natural product of just letting go and being okay with being an ordinary schmuck that experiences a bit of everything. It's a byproduct of simply not having a scoreboard. Not having a scoreboard over time. That's just what unfolds. And that's incredibly freeing. And I think sometimes what I see as I work with people and share this understanding is I see a lot of effort and pressure and judgment and pressure to do better, be better, get somewhere other than here, experience something other than what we're experiencing. And all of it is so wrapped up in constantly judging our experience. And I know, my horses have taught me unequivocally that effort and judgment are an enormous amount of tension and pressure in us. And all that does is just disconnect us from that more expansive self. It just takes us farther away from where we're actually hoping to be. It has the opposite effect. And it's as easy as just accepting the whole range of human experience and knowing we don't have to make meaning of it, have it mean anything about ourselves when we're experiencing it, or when somebody else is experiencing it. And that all of it, if we just don't resist, if we're aware, we understand it, and we don't resist, what unfolds from that is an extraordinary amount of ease and freedom in our lives that I think Jason and I can both say is a relief beyond measure. To be okay with being fully human, knowing that moment by moment we're doing the best we can, and that it's all completely okay, that we are already good enough, and there isn't anywhere to get to, that here is what there is, and that's just simply enough. Jason, did you want to jump in? Did you have any insights bubble up or anything you'd like to share before we open it up?
Thanks. I just loved listening to you. Well, I understand now why the title of today's webinar a lot better. And I just wanted to share, that we talked about when we were talking about this. I shared with you, this image of the centaur, this half human, half horse. And when you talked about toggling between, our inner worlds. My experience, especially with, some conversations I've had just in the last couple of days with some clients, what it looks like to me is when we are making meaning of our experience in the moment, it's as if we're so focused on something, that this illusion in front of us, that we don't look down or turn around to see that what we're made of is both our human experience and this other more vast experience, this other more vast nature of who we are. And so I just really appreciate that you're pointing to, without a scoreboard, we get to just rest in the moment. And even if the moment is uncomfortable, we don't lose sight of the fact that we always have access. All we have to do is look down and see that, we've got the horse's body. We're made of more than what we think we are. And so you're pointing to these inner worlds. It's easy to get caught up in that inner world of thought, and to think that that's all there is. And it's just this momentary glimpse of something bigger, and our entire experience changes. And so, when folks are wondering, well, how do I do this? I think that what is so helpful is just to know that it's not complicated. It's just a momentary remembering that we have access to all of this. Like you said, this falling out of the moment and remembering that there's no scoreboard. But even you and I will get caught up in thought. It's not a place to get to. And that's the accepting ourselves, warts and all. So, I was thinking about how I got so caught up in the boys' soccer game a few weeks ago, and I was upset with the reffing and all that. But as soon as I saw that, I was able to just enjoy the fact that I could have that experience, that I could have the experience of being caught up and falling out of it. And to me, it's like, we live in this gorgeous valley, and every time I leave, there's a coming back that I get to enjoy. I come back to this beautiful valley, and I just, my heart soars because it's just so beautiful, and I love the coming back. But I can't have that experience unless I leave. So to me, that understanding that being the messy human that I can be sometimes, that's what Rumi is pointing to. That's the gift. That's the unexpected gift, because it opens me up to that experience of coming home. And that coming home is such a joyful, rich experience. And so for me, I never used to value and appreciate that being messy, being human, falling out of it, tripping, stumbling, making a mess. I never used to value that. But now I get to see that without that, I don't get to experience the richness of coming home.
I can't tell you how much I love hearing you share that, Jason. I just you captured in words something that has been a little bit elusive for me. And that was so beautiful. That what's so beautiful is that feeling of coming home and falling out of the tension and the swirl, but that we could never have that. We could never have that if we didn't have both. There would be nothing, there wouldn't be that delicious appreciation, that moment of waking up wouldn't be possible. And so, you know, it's such a shift in seeing, in how we see moments that feel contracted or less than easeful. It's just simply the meaning we make out of them that puts them in different categories of good, bad, ugly. Like those don't exist at all unless we judge. That doesn't exist. There is no such thing. And so if we're willing to experience all of that, knowing that it is experiencing all of it, that's the richness of what it means to be human, then it really becomes embracing, not just coping, not just using a technique to manage, not just getting better at, not just improving, but actually embracing the whole of our humanity, because all of it is integral to having this rich human experience, the most beautiful of which is coming home, continually coming home to our wholeness and wellness and love and understanding. I love that, Jason. I love how you shared that. So on that note, now that we've shared what's been alive for us and what's been coming up, we'd love to open it up and see if there's anyone who has had anything come up for them that they'd want to share, anything that's come up for you in your own life, or a question. It might be either one. So if there's anything like that you would love to jump in with, you can just take your mouse to the top right of your little video image and unmute yourself and just jump in with your comment or question.
Okay, so I have a comment.
Hi, Sandy.
Hi. So this was so helpful. It was just really great to understand to really get you to both explain having these feelings are helpful. I'm living in California and my husband is out of town, and we've just had another red flag warning, which means tomorrow night there could be a fire again. We left we were evacuated 2 years ago. We were here together, but we only woke up when there was smoke. And when we drove out, it was all smoke and fire. So I'm a little scared. I have been following the 3 Ps since then. It's been very helpful. But so this is not past fears, this is current fears. So what I would like some support on is how to get through the current fear, which is I'm here alone with my dog, and there could be another fire. And how do you handle those feelings within the 3P experience?
Jason, I just unmuted you. Would you like to jump in? Share what you're seeing about that?
Yeah, thanks. Well, Sandy, the first thing I'll say is I can really relate. Sumaya and I lived in a place where we were evacuated several times. And what was interesting to me about that experience, and I'm sorry you're going through it, was that, Sumaya had all this responsibility. She was the mayor of our town. And so she was just, she had no time to think about anything else. But I had plenty of time to be scared. I had plenty of time to be fearful. And so, what I would say, Sandy, is that makes sense. It makes sense. That's how we're wired as human beings, is fear is a way of giving us information. But as Sumaya said, there's a difference between information and meaning, And so if it's okay that you're scared, if it's okay that, there's a scary thing happening, well, then you can still get on with your life. It's no different than if I'm angry with my friend, I can feel that anger and I can still get on with my life. I don't have to stop everything. And so, I was just thinking about, an experience for me from 25 years ago when I was taking a wilderness first aid class, wilderness first responder class in Boulder from a grizzled veteran. And he was asking us about, what do we do when we come upon a scene where someone's really hurt? And, we were all trying to impress the instructor by, shouting out answers, check airway, see, check consciousness, all this. And, he kept on saying, no, 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 no. And finally we all just, were silent. And he said, smoke a cigarette. And I said, what? And he said, well, if you don't have a clear head, well, then you're not going to be helpful, right? You're going to be gripped by your thinking. And so that, I've forgotten pretty much everything else from that class, but 25 years later, what stayed with me was, metaphorically, to smoke a cigarette. And to me, that doesn't mean, now I did have the opportunity to be, practicing wilderness medicine on a number of occasions. And it doesn't mean I don't feel the gravity of the situation. Someone's severely hurt, but I can feel that the gravity of the situation, and I can still find clarity and take action in a helpful way. I'm not denying things. I'm just accepting that this is a serious situation, and that if I'm okay with that and I don't make more meaning of it than just accepting the information, then I can carry on. Sumaya, would you add to that?
Yeah, Sandy, well, for one thing, I just so appreciate you sharing. And like Jason, I'm so sorry that you and all the folks in California are still going through this. It's just a challenging situation for sure. I think it really speaks to what Jason and I were sharing, that there's such a big difference between having a challenging experience and having a challenging experience and making meaning of it, making it mean something. So like if I'm really having a strong emotional experience and I make it mean something, like if I make it mean that, that I am not good enough yet, that I have more work to do, that, I'm really not, I'm not getting it somehow. I add so much tension that it's almost like blowing on a fire, it feels like to me. It feels like what started as a little flame of what I'm experiencing, the meaning that I'm making, the judging that I am sort of inserting into the experience I'm having, just fans the flames until it magnifies the experience, becomes more tense, and it gets bigger and the reaction grows. Whereas if I let myself just, I'm fully going to feel this without making meaning out of it, without having it mean anything about me, without having it be a big deal. Again, the words that often come to my mind are nothing to see here. I'm angry as heck. Nothing to see here. Yeah. That happened last week. I'd love to share that experience at some point. But whatever the experience is, whether it's fear or anger, so what? It's just part of being human. And when I feel like if I say nothing to see here, this doesn't mean anything, that what happens then is it just does its thing, and then eventually it runs out of oxygen and it moves on. Not because I'm trying to push it away, make it move on, but actually the opposite, because I'm like, there it is. That's what I'm feeling. No biggie. It means nothing. Nothing at all. That way I don't add more oxygen to that. I don't make it grow by gripping and adding tension, blowing on that little flame.
That's
Jason,
so helpful because I was so angry, just so angry. And I thought, it's okay. You're angry. You wanted to stay in Crested Butte and you're in California. So I got through that. And then, but this is really clear because I was talking to a friend who's very frugal. And I told her, and she said, go get a hotel. And I thought, well, of course that's what I should do, but that would be crazy. You're spending money on a hotel room. And it's exactly that thing. It's like, why would you do that? Because it will feel okay. I will not be up here in the fire. I will be in a hotel with other people downtown where there's no fire risk. And so it costs money. It's okay. You're not unfrugal. You're just taking care of yourself. And some people may laugh at you and say, oh, Sandy left and got a hotel room. It's like, I don't care, right? So that's really helpful. I can't tell you, both of you, this is so helpful because I was really working the principles and all this stuff, but still I was so scared and so angry. And now it's like, yeah, so you're not scared anymore because you're going to go to the hotel. They'll take the dog. It's no problem. I'm going to the same room we stayed at the last time we were evacuated. So it has a little, history to
it. Sandy, I can hear the lightness in your voice. I can hear the ease coming in your voice, which is really nice to hear.
Yeah.
I can tell. Jason, did you want to add something more?
No, I'm good. I agree with you. Sandy sounds much lighter already.
No, but I think your cigarette analogy, although I never smoked, just like, yeah, this hotel room is my cigarette. I'm going to go sit in this red room, historic room, and not smoke, but pretend I'll think of you as smoking or imaginally smoking a cigarette. Because, yeah, it's like being calm is the only way to get through this, not being scared to death.
Yeah, and also being okay if you start to feel scared to death, that's not a big deal. That doesn't mean anything. It's not something you have to push away.
Well, Sumaya, actually, that's what I was going to add. Is I was just reminded of a story I just heard about this guy named Laird Hamilton, who's this very well-known, big wave surfer who puts his life intentionally on the line over and over again. And someone was interviewing him and said, you seem fearless. And he said, oh, well, that would be a real misunderstanding. He said, I'm scared out of my mind the whole time. It just doesn't look like a big deal because who wouldn't be scared looking in the face of an enormous wave? And so Sandy, to your situation, if it just seems like, well, who wouldn't be scared in this situation? It doesn't mean anything other than you're human. And then you just get to do what makes sense to you next, which is what you just shared with us. It makes sense to you that you would put yourself in a place of safety. I think that's great.
It's funny what it looks to me like, we're so wise. Everything that comes through us has enormous wisdom to it. And fear is no different. Fear is, we think of fear as somehow this bad thing just because we make meaning, we judge it. It's so not. We couldn't possibly make our way through this world without fear. It protects us. And in a sense, if you didn't have that fear, you wouldn't now be considering going to a hotel room, which seems like an eminently reasonable thing to do in the face of a fire. So it looks to me like, oh, wow, that's a lot to be celebrated, that fear is just simply wisdom moving you in a certain direction to keep you safe. And, it's just nothing to see here, basically. It's wisdom moving through you like it always does. And the beautiful thing is you're now listening to it and you're going to go proverbially smoke your cigarette, which seems like just the thing to do.
Just don't proverbially flick your cigarette butt out the window.
Yeah. So thank you, Sandy. I really appreciate hearing all that, and be safe out there. And, you can also just really enjoy being in a hotel room. That can be a bonus too. So I'd love to open it up, and just with the final few minutes that we have here, is there anyone else who'd love to jump in?
I actually have a question.
Is that Michelle?
Yeah, it's Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi. Thank you so much for this. I think I've learned so much from the two of you in just the short conversations that we've had and through the last webinar and this one. And I'm really grateful. And I think seeing the two of you both kind of play off of one another and share this understanding is really helpful. And I found so much more ease in my parenting. And I think that was really a challenge before. But what I'm encountering now is that my husband is really still sort of caught in the cycle that I think both were in before. And it just kind of came up again last night, and he was very worried about our children and kind of focusing on all of the negative things that he could think of about them and about their future. And I just couldn't get there. I was like, but, this is really wonderful what's happening to this one. And we have 3 children, and, just really focusing on the wonderful things that are going on with them and trying to help him understand that he can't really control them anymore. They're teenagers and young adults, and you can't control other people. We can really just delight in, what they're doing that's positive. But I think he's frustrated with me because he feels like this approach, although it's bringing me joy and I feel good about it, maybe isn't, I don't know, the most responsible way to parent. And this worry that he feels as though he's being responsible, but I think it's causing him so much pain. And I'm wondering if you have any advice about that, and I think I see it as, it's so much easier for you two, but I'm sure you both disagree on things as well.
Well, thank you for the question. It's such a reasonable, understandable question. And we actually get this question a lot. Jason and I have worked with quite a number of people whose partner or spouse was really not interested in hearing about this. And so it's something that we've talked about quite a bit. And I'd love to share what I see about that and then see what Jason might chime in. What I see about it is, well, the expression that comes to mind is, it actually just takes one to tango. And what I mean by that is that what I've seen over and over, and I think what Jason and I have seen over and over, is that when one person of a couple, or in any relationship really, starts tapping into their well-being in the way that you're describing, where there's less fear, there's more enjoyment, more being in the moment, that even if it doesn't seem that way at first, that radiates out into a relationship, that it inevitably affects the other spouse, even if at first it's hard to see that. That it almost feels to me like it's infectious. Well-being is infectious. And that there's never a downside to staying in our well-being, to having more hope, more sense of freedom, more sense of hope for our children, less fear for our children. And that feeling is it's so powerful for others that over time, we've seen it in the many folks that we work with, where we're only working with one half of the couple. We've seen them be able to really tap into a lot of compassion when their spouses are gripped with fear, and a lot of wisdom about how to share that, share what they're seeing, but in a really loving, compassionate way, and really staying in their grounding, even when their spouse gets gripped. And we've seen the overall well-being of relationships really increase just by one person tapping more and more into their inner well-being and into their wisdom. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't sometimes feel rocky, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't sometimes feel sticky, that, there are times, whatever it might be, all those things are still true. But I think Jason and I both have seen over time how it can still really unfold in beautiful ways, and still isn't even the right word, that it can unfold in beautiful ways with just you, Michelle, tapping into that, and that can really be no downside. And especially when it comes to parenting, I think the wisdom that we tap into about our children and how to guide them, especially as we get older, is nothing short of miraculous. you know, in my life, it feels like nothing short of miraculous to be fueled more by a sense of hope and possibility for them than held back by fear for them. You know, and that whenever I do feel myself going into some kind of a whirlwind of fear, that I know there's nothing real about that. If I just hang tight, it passes, and I go back to a feeling of love, understanding, possibility. And I think that has, what that communicates to our kids is they don't have to be afraid. That they have everything that they need, that their life will unfold in beautiful ways, that they don't need to be gripped by fear. We communicate that without words every day. And so you being in that space of not being afraid for them communicates wordlessly to them that they can be in a space of hope and excitement and enjoyment and openness, rather than always in a place of fear, which is so contracted and so limited and really, you know, limits what we're capable of. Jason, turn to you.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I really appreciate your question. And I was thinking about how frequently we hear something very similar. And, you know, on the theme of what we were sharing in the first part of this webinar, I've seen over and over again that when people go in and out of from the scoreboard to that falling away and feeling a sense of compassion. So what I mean by that is I've heard over and over again that when one partner is starting to see something different as you are, and then we look at our partners and we see that they're still having the old experience that we knew so well, we can experience that kind of with the scoreboard, and then, you know, experience it kind of like, oh boy, now we disagree, right? And now we're operating in this very limited space. And I've also seen those same clients of ours, when they fall out of that limited thinking, that limited inner world that Sumaya was talking about, it's not that they work at compassion, but compassion shows up. And compassion creates all these possibilities, because compassion now, these people going through something so similar to what you're describing, they just feel connected to their partner. And from that place of connection, their own wisdom speaks to them about what to say, what to do. And what I see over and over again is that when we're in the scoreboard place, we end up really talking about the content of the worry and trying to sort of negotiate a better way to deal with the content of the worry. And when we find ourselves in this other place, we're not trying to negotiate the content. We're really seeing our spouse and our partner and our children, and we're just coming from a good feeling. And that coming from a good feeling expands our view. And now we don't just see the content to talk about, we see all this other stuff too. So that gives us so much more at our disposal to work with. And from there, the conversation and the connection starts to look and feel really different. Now, I can say that's happened in our clients, but I can also say that's happened for us. Because whenever it looks to us like it's about solving the problem the content is presenting us with, it's an invitation back to that more contracted place. And the moment we see that, we remember that there's some other possibility. And then we come from a different place. So even very recently, we were talking about a parenting issue, and it looked so different to us when we were trying to solve the problem and when we were just coming from a place of compassion. And it's night and day.
Well, thank you. That's really helpful. I guess, you know, part of it is it's nice to hear both of your perspectives, sort of saying, it's okay, Michelle, you're doing a good job. You know, I feel very confident in where I'm coming from, and I'm just trying to listen and be present. But of course, you want your partner to not feel pain as well. But I guess that's just part of the experience, like you're saying.
Yeah, and I would say in the same way that Sumaya was really recognizing, Michelle, the gift you're giving your kids of not worrying about them. The same is true of your sweet husband. If you're not worried about him, and if you know in your heart that he has access, just like you do, and just like your kids do, to seeing something new, instead of being concerned that he's struggling, that kindness, that goodwill, that understanding that you would extend to him, just like you would extend it to your kids, I think is fertile ground for a new experience of him.
Yeah, I love what Jason just shared. What I would add to that is one of the big breakthroughs for me is realizing that if I become more comfortable with whatever's uncomfortable for me, with my own discomfort, I can also be more comfortable with somebody else's discomfort. So I don't have to, it doesn't look like a problem to me if one of my kids is really gripped in their thinking and upset about something. It doesn't look like a problem if Jason is really caught up in his thinking and having a low period or moment where he's really gripped by his fear. I just know that I do that too. And if I'm comfortable with it in myself, I become more and more comfortable with it in somebody else and don't see it as a problem. And I would share that Jason graciously did that for me this past week. I was gripped with a thought storm that lasted days that was about our oldest teenager. And I knew what it was. I wasn't, terribly concerned about it, but boy, it didn't feel very good at the time. And the beautiful thing is Jason didn't feel like he had to talk me out of it or that there was any problem that I was experiencing that. That's part of embracing. If we embrace our own humanity, then we're also embracing other people's humanity. And there's just so much grace in that, in knowing that, hey, I get to be human, but so do you. I get to be gripped in thought and have moments of fear and anger and frustration, and so do you. And that I don't have to do anything about those experiences that I'm having, and I don't have to do anything about yours either. It's a joint embracing of humanity. And I found that, when I see Jason in his eyes, that it's not a problem that I'm gripped for 3 whole days with heaven knows what, something loosens in me. Oh, it gives me, in a sense, some permission to just be in it, knowing it will pass. And there's such a something so beautiful and supportive about that.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. I'm glad it was helpful.
Thanks.
So on that note, it's 1 o'clock on the nose. So in respect for everybody's time at lunchtime, thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. It's really a pleasure, but also really an honor that you would take time and bring your questions and join us and really be in this with us. So thank you, and we hope you join us a month from now for our next one. We'll of course send out information about the topic, and if you're not already on our newsletter, please be sure to hop on it at blue.coaching.org, and have a wonderful rest of the day. And we look forward to staying connected with everyone. So here we can, if you want to unmute yourself, or actually, I think I can unmute all, and we can just say a quick goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Michelle. Bye, Bridget.
Goodbye from
Bye,
Canada.
Sandy. Stay safe. Bye, Sonia.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye, Monica.
Yeah.
All right.
That time is here too.